coming on the air with that desperate push to get Americans and refugees out of Gaza with, look at this, new explosions in just the last few minutes here. You're about to see them there in Gaza, even with President Biden. There they are, calling for a so-called pause in fighting to get prisoners out. We are live on the ground, live at the White House and live here at the Capitol with the first big test for the new Speaker of the House, pushing a plan to help get new money to Israel, but not Ukraine. Why that bill looks DOA and what's next for the GOP. Plus, the mayor of New York City canceling a super important meeting at the White House to rush back home. Could it have anything to do with the FBI raiding the house of his chief fundraiser? Then, in our original, the Persian version, an inside look at the new history-making movie that's trying to turn stereotypes about Iranian Americans on their head. Why the filmmaker says now is the time to rewrite the script. And Beatlemania, here, there, and everywhere. 45 years later, their newest and last song, bringing the tears and the tech thanks to AI. We'll explain how the Beatles did it and why so many people just can't let it be. Hey there, I'm Hallie tonight. And tonight, Israeli officials say they have Gaza City surrounded now and that a ceasefire is definitely not on the table, even as the U.S. now is calling for a pause in the fighting. Look at this. I want to show you the skyline in Gaza in just the last couple of minutes here. You've probably been watching it if you've been watching it live here on our air. The sky getting lit up by explosions. You're about to see some of them. What that ground campaign, too, looked like earlier today. The Israeli prime minister says the military is at the height of the battle, in his words, in retaliation for that Hamas terror attack on October 7th. That's after multiple strikes in the last couple days on a packed refugee camp on the north end of the Gaza Strip. More and more people being rushed to hospitals. People gathering at a school after it happened. And new anger now about just how many innocent civilian lives this war has cost. In Gaza, more than 9,000 people are believed to be dead. In Israel, more than 1,400. More than half of Gaza's population has now been displaced, forced out of their homes, according to one UN agency. With that danger and uncertainty, sending people in Gaza scrambling to get out to safety. Some of them are getting out. Today, a group of at least 79 Americans and their family members got through the Rafah border crossing into Egypt, as the White House says it's working to get more information about the Americans still stuck in Gaza. And, you know, another priority, of course, the nearly 250 hostages Israel's military says are still in the hands of the Hamas terrorists who abducted them. Ellison Barber is near the Israel-Gaza border for us. Monica Alba is live for us at the White House. Ellison, let me start with you because I've been watching, and I know that just over the skyline where you are, we have seen in just the last 45 minutes or so a series of explosions there. Do we know anything about them? Do you know what's happening? Give us a sense of what's up on the ground.
So I can tell you what we think was happening based on what military experts have said and based on what we have been watching, reporting in this area for over 3 weeks now, and especially from this exact spot since Israel announced that they had gone into the second phase of this war and there were ground forces inside of northern Gaza, and they were going to be staying there. So what we had been watching, and we can show you some of the images from just a few minutes ago, because it's stopped a little bit right now, but we were watching in this one pocket along the border, which based on looking at maps from where we are standing, we believe that was the outskirts of kind of the northwest outskirts of Gaza City. And we were watching just a massive amount of flares put up in the air. Again, this went on for at least 45 minutes consistently. You could see underneath those flares massive amounts of smoke and then numerous explosions happening on the ground inside it, in addition to hearing the booms of heavy caliber artillery. What military experts looking at that had said is that oftentimes you will see in military operations those flares go up, a massive concentration to help troops on the ground be able to see what they are doing. What made this so striking was that we have not seen, and we have been out here same hours, overnight hours, every single night since the ground invasion, the full-scale ground invasion started on Friday night. We have not seen, we see flares all the time, but nothing that concentrated and that consistent since this ground invasion has really kicked off. So they stayed up, and there was just constant military activity underneath it, massive amounts of smoke, explosions, and it went on for quite a while. And we were seeing that less than an hour after we had heard from a spokesperson with the Israel Defense Forces saying that they had forces that were encircling and had completed an encirclement of Gaza City. Israel's military, as well as Prime Minister Netanyahu, have been very clear in that they are focusing their military efforts in northern Gaza and ultimately Gaza City, because that is where they believe Hamas primarily operates out of it. So we started to see that massive amount of activity really not long after we were hearing confirmation from Israel's defense forces that their troops had, in their words, encircled Gaza City. Hallie?
Just to give people a sense of the geography here, Ellison, to the south, right, of where Gaza City is, of course, is where that Rafah border crossing is. And the expectation is you've got hundreds of people who have been able to or who are expected to get out on a daily basis to escape what's happening in Gaza, right?
Right. So right now it is only for the only people that have been able to cross into Egypt via the Rafah border crossing are Gazans, Palestinians who were injured and needed to get treatment in hospitals in Egypt, and people who have other passports. Either they have dual citizenship or they are foreign nationals of another country. For the coming days, we had been told, NBC News had been told by sources that they were expecting to let about 500 every day, up to 500 foreign nationals or those with dual citizenships out of the Rafah crossing. We saw more of it happening today. But the thing to remember when we do watch that, Hallie, is for the most part, Palestinian civilians, they do not have an option to leave. That is really just for foreign nationals at this point. And you have over 2 million people trapped inside of Gaza, and southern Gaza, where IDF has said to go to stay safe, has not really been safe at all. We've seen constant airstrikes in that area as well. Hallie?
Ellison Barber live for us there on the Israel-Gaza border. Ellison, thank you. Let me bring in Monica Alba to talk more about this, because, Monica, we've got the administration saying today, no, the president doesn't want a new policy on a ceasefire. He wants a temporary pause to get hostages out. It is a kind of fine line they're walking here, because Israel has been furious at others in the international community calling for a ceasefire. You heard Ellison report on it. Israel is like, no way we're doing a ceasefire. They believe they're defending themselves after that terror attack on October 7th. The U.S. to this point has backed up Israel. So as we look ahead to what's to come in the next 48 hours here, how does the pressure from the U.S. play into whatever Israel could do next?
And remember, Hallie, Secretary Blinken is literally on his plane right now, headed to Israel to deliver this message face to face. And we expect that to be that they still would like for Israel to continue to really consider the lives of civilians here as they're making all of these military decisions. That's one we know we've heard from the president over the last few days and weeks, but of course one that is delivered with a bit more of a punch in person from the Secretary of State. And of course, all of that is the backdrop to what you've just been discussing with Ellison, because we know that the president last night did push for this pause, and he puts it in the kind of context of a humanitarian pause. And there's an example for one that we have seen since this war started, which was when the American-Israeli hostages were released. They were allowed to be transferred over the Gaza-Israel border because Prime Minister Netanyahu at the time agreed not to do any kind of airstrikes or military activity so that they could get out safely. That's something the U.S. pushed for and was able to secure. So the president and his top national security spokesman is saying we would like to see more of that, ideally to rescue more prisoners. Listen how he put it today at the briefing.
What we're talking about are temporary, localized pauses in the fighting to meet a certain goal or goals. As I said, get aid in, get people out.
To be clear, they're saying we're not just talking about one more humanitarian pause. They would like to see a series of them, potentially, Hallie, but they have maintained their position that a total and complete ceasefire, stopping the fighting, would only benefit Hamas.
Monica Alba, thank you very much, live for us there in Washington. Appreciate it. I want to bring in now Maha Elbana, who just crossed into Egypt out of Gaza, and her sister, Summer Elbana, here in the United States. Maha and Summer, we're so glad to have you join us. Maha, I understand that you obviously have been in Gaza. You have not been able to FaceTime or to Zoom your sister because the reception is so bad, and this is the first time that you're seeing each other since you've been able to get out. What message do you have for your sister? I want to give you that opportunity to share anything with her.
The only message I have is for the fighting to end. We do actually want to see a ceasefire on the table. The conditions in Gaza are unbearable for everyone, and the only ones suffering are the innocent civilians, women and children.
Maha, how was it to be able to get out? Can you tell us about the process of being able to cross into Egypt? How long it took you, what that was like? So I think that Maha might be frozen there somewhere. I'll go to you. Go ahead. I know it's tough, this tech here between us and between Egypt, where you are.
Hi, honey.
Summer, what do you want to say to your sister?
I just want to give her a big hug, and I cannot wait for her to take a nice, long, hot shower.
Have you two, Summer, been able to talk at all? Oh.
We have, but it's been like this. So we try to do voice notes more than anything on the WhatsApp. It was a lot easier. And, you know, my heart would just stop every time I didn't see those 2 check marks turn blue. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Like, is she there? Is she okay? You know, it was a constant fear of what is happening over there. I know they told her to move to the south, but she was also still telling me that she can hear the bombing is getting closer and closer to where she was hiding. So it was definitely like a roller coaster of emotions, you know, all day. I couldn't really sleep. I couldn't eat. I felt selfish to just enjoy life here, knowing that they're all suffering there, especially with her. She told me that she was in a hideout, basically in a house with about 40 people. No, they couldn't even flush the toilet. There was no water, no food, no electricity for her to charge her phone. It was just devastating to hear that coming from her.
Maha, I think you're unfrozen now. I think you might be able to hear us. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of getting out, of being able to get out of Gaza into Egypt, what that was like, what you saw? I think we have lost her at this point. But Summer, I'll go back to you because I think we do still have you. One of the things that your sister said before we lost her connection there was just the idea of the situation being so incredibly dire. And you've laid that out as well. Based on the conversations you've had with your sister, what do you want to see happen here? And when do you think you'll be able to physically be able to give your sister that hug that I know means so much to you?
Yes, when I spoke to her, she said that they gave him 72 hours to leave Egypt. So I'm hoping that she'll be back here in the U.S. within those 72 hours. They did book them a hotel room, so she is safe now. She's in Egypt, and she just told me to stand by. We did book her the airplane ticket, so she should be here by tomorrow if there's no other delays.
And you've heard from the New Jersey governor's office, I understand, too, even about this, right? Offering to help?
Yes, I did. They said if she has any type of issues, just to give them a call. They gave me a direct line from the Governor Murphy's office, which I'm very thankful about. I've signed every petition out there. I've called every House rep, the president's office, and I've been receiving emails, letters, and everything. And they just basically, they couldn't really promise anything, but they let us know that they are doing something about it. They're keeping an eye on the case, just waiting for, the negotiation to go through. And we were patient enough to get her home, and hopefully she'll be home tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to that.
Summer Albana, thank you so much. And our thanks to your sister, Maha Albana, as well. Obviously, coming into us there from Egypt, where she has just literally been for only a matter of hours after crossing through the Rafah crossing there out of Gaza. Summer, thank you. Our thanks to your sister as well. So meaningful to have you both here. Appreciate it. Let's talk about what's happening here in Washington, because just about an hour from now, the House is set to vote on a bill to give Israel more money, $14 billion in emergency help, essentially, in what is becoming the first big test for the new Speaker of the House. Thing is, Democrats say this bill is dead on arrival because the Senate and President Biden have both said they're not going to be down with this, partly because of the plan's proposed cuts to the IRS. Plus, Senate Democrats want some other things in this, too. They want, for example, humanitarian aid for Gaza, funding for the U.S.-Mexico border, money to help Ukraine in its war involved as well. In his first leadership news conference earlier today, Speaker Mike Johnson saying Israel is the top priority.
Israel doesn't need a ceasefire. It needs its allies to cease with the politics and deliver support now. And that's what we're doing. House Republicans plan to do that. We're going to do it in short order, and it provides Israel the aid it needs to defend itself, free its hostages, and eradicate Hamas.
Sahil Kapoor is joining us now. Sahil, in some ways, this is less about getting funding over to Israel. It seems like there is generally support in the United States Congress from the White House to be able to do that, right? The question is how. It's the process, and that speaks to something deeper, which is, can Speaker Mike Johnson, the brand new Speaker of the House, wrangle his conference together and actually get something done here?
Yeah, well, party unity here for Speaker Johnson is just phase one of the plan, Hallie. We'll find out in the next hour or so if he can get the votes in his narrow majority to pass this aid to Israel bill. We know most, if not all, Democrats are going to oppose it because of those IRS cuts, which they say is a partisan poison pill. They point out the Congressional Budget Office says it will increase the deficit by lowering tax collection. So if Speaker Johnson is able to pass this through the House of Representatives, that's also not really the assignment. The assignment is to make a law, and that requires dealing with the Democratic Senate and getting something to President Biden's desk, which he can sign. And that's where there are multiple issues here that will present a major test for the new Speaker of the House. There is government funding. The House and Senate are moving on different paths with the appropriations process. Of course, with Israel aid, the House wants to do it separately. The Senate wants to do it all in one big package, as you were pointing out. On Ukraine aid, Republicans say they want not just border money tied to it, but they want changes to border policies and immigration policies to tighten up the asylum system, make it harder for migrants to come over here and make their case. All of that kind of presents this test for Speaker Johnson. How's he going to make a law? There's a November 17th deadline, and the growing feeling on Capitol Hill is that all of these things might get melded into one together.
Sahil Kapoor, thank you very much. We'll be checking back in with you, I know, as that vote continues. Appreciate it. Also on the other side of Congress, a tiny but significant crack tonight in a months-long blockade of military promotions. With the Senate tonight confirming 3 high-level Navy, Air Force, and Marine officers. A big deal, a big moment, because it means that the Joint Chiefs of Staff is now fully in place. And at a key time, obviously, with the war in the Mideast, of course, the war of Russia invading Ukraine. Still, some 360-plus other nominations are still being held up. That's a huge problem for the military. It's because Alabama Republican Tommy Tuberville is protesting the Defense Department's reproductive rights policy. He's been slowing things down. But now, even some of his fellow Republicans seem to have had enough. That's why you're seeing this moment. And for military families, it is a moment. The end of this blockade, that's what they want to see. That really can't come soon enough. Listen to what one advocate is telling our own Ryan Nobles.
These families have been serving for literally decades, and this is the first time where they are being used as political pawns. These are the people that just make the big decisions about war and peace and funding, and here it's at a standstill. They can't even get them confirmed for these really, really important jobs, and it just feels like a complete failure and a slap in the face for their service.
Ryan Nobles is joining us now. Ryan, I know you're going to have more of that interview coming up on Nightly News tonight, but talk to us here big picture, because this is finally some movement here and an issue that may seem kind of weedsy or may seem kind of beltway-ish, but in so many ways it is not. It speaks directly to military readiness, to military preparation, and to Senator Tuberville, it is a point that he is standing on principle, despite, frankly, a lot of pushback against him. I know his office will say his constituents seem to like it, but there is a question mark more broadly nationally on that.
Yeah, and you know, Hallie, if you talk to the leaders at the Department of Defense, right up to the Secretary of Defense, they'll tell you that this puts at serious risk U.S. national security. And there's both a short-term and long-term problem here that the military is dealing with. The short-term one is that there are 360 officers who are not in the position that they need to be in at a time where there are conflicts popping up all over the world, some of which the United States could become directly involved in. We know that there are military ships, for instance, in the Middle East right now at the ready should that conflict start to grow out of control. But there's also a long-term problem, and the long-term problem being that many of these officers who are career officials, have been in this job for decades, may just decide it's not worth it to sit and wait for this promotion to come through, that they'll instead retire and take more lucrative jobs in the private sector and jobs with more stability for their families. So this is something the Department of Defense has been telling Senator Tuberville for a long time, that this needs to come to some sort of resolution. But to your point, he is resolute. He is very much opposed to this policy that allows service members who are serving in states where there are abortion restrictions to travel to have those abortion services somewhere else. And he believes it's up to the administration to rescind that policy, not for him to back off these holds on these military promotions.
Now that we've seen a little bit of movement here, Ryan, an emphasis on a little bit because it's 3, right? And we know that there are more than 300 nominees still waiting. Is there any sense that there may be some momentum now for others in the Senate, including some of Senator Tuberville's fellow Republicans, to do something else, to take some more action? The Senate's got a lot of rules. It's got a lot of procedures. Is there an appetite to try to get past some of that?
Yeah, and this is where we have to try and avoid getting into the weeds, because the question is a weedsy one. And, you know, there were 60 nominations that took place last night. The problem here is the process takes so long. And really what you saw play out here over the past couple of days was an indication of just how long this process would take if they took them up one by one as a way to show the rest of us, all of us out there, how big of a problem this is, and to try to put the pressure on Senator Tuberville to lift that hold. So far, he seems unwilling to do so. So, Hallie, right now, if they want to get all these officers confirmed, they're just going to have to do it one by one, and that's going to take a lot of time, and it's also going to prevent the Senate from doing a lot of other business as a result.
True. Ryan Nobles covering all things Capitol Hill for us tonight. Thank you. We'll look for more of your reporting tonight on NBC Nightly News. So in New York, it is Trump kid musical chairs in court today as the second son of former President Trump takes the stand in that big civil tax fraud case against the Trump family and their company. There's Eric Trump walking out of court literally in just the last couple of minutes here. This is coming just into us as he's wrapping up his day in court. Somebody shouting, "We love you." He didn't make any comments, answer any questions to reporters. Before that, you see both brothers here, Don Jr. and Eric Trump, at the defense table before their testimony today. Now, Eric, at one point, sounding kind of frustrated as prosecutors pressed him on his father's financial statements that the AG says were wildly inflated. Remember, the accusation at the heart of this is that Mr. Trump wildly exaggerated about how much he was actually worth. You have the former president late today on Truth Social saying, "So sad to see my sons being persecuted in what he calls a political witch hunt." Next week, it is his daughter, Ivanka Trump, who is set to testify, along with the former president himself. Lindsay Reiser is live outside court for us tonight. Sounds like things got kind of spicy here right before court adjourned in just the last maybe half hour, not even, with accusations of misogyny being thrown around. What is going on here? Bring us up to speed.
It was all about the law clerk here, who we've heard from before in this case. Judge Engoron had instituted a partial gag order against defendant former President Trump from making any comments about his staff, worried about safety and implications there, and actually has fined him twice to the tune of $15,000. Now the judge is threatening to expand that partial gag order to the attorneys. And it all started with an aside about this law clerk, and essentially the Trump's attorneys saying that the clerk keeps giving the judge information, saying she may have a different view on the case than you based on her political background. And the judge shot back saying, "I have an absolute unfettered right to get advice from my principal law clerk." At one point, the attorney complaining about notes being passed. And that's when he pounded the table and said, "I have every right to get notes. You are not entitled to my notes for my law clerk." During all of that, Eric Trump just sort of appeared uncomfortable in his seat. This was all before everything adjourned. And today he did testify to some of the facts of the matter of the case, essentially with those statements of financial condition. The documents that the AG's office said contained overvalued assets and appraisals. Essentially, Eric Trump has said before that he didn't have anything to do with those statements of financial condition, didn't have anything to do with appraisals. But then as the Attorney General's office would present documentation, then he would concede, well, clearly I had a little bit to do with it. So Don Jr. is done for the trial until and unless defense attorneys call him. We'll see Eric back tomorrow. Hallie?
Ivanka Trump is supposed to testify next week, Lindsay, but is she trying to get out of that?
She is appealing. She is appealing the subpoena to have her testify, which is supposed to be Wednesday. Her attorneys are also appealing for a stay of the entire proceeding. And so the Attorney General's office, they've already responded to that filing, saying that her filing contained no grounds for really such an extreme remedy here. But her attorneys are saying there's an undue burden. She would have to leave her minor children in Florida. She has been dismissed from this case. She's no longer a co-defendant because of the statute of limitation. So we will see how that plays out, Hallie.
Lindsay Reiser live for us there in New York. Lindsay, thank you. Also in New York, the fate of the former king of crypto is now officially in the hands of a jury in New York. And it's possible they could be deliberating past dinner time tonight, into the night. That's after the jury's final instructions from the judge as they determine whether Sam Bankman-Fried broke the law. He is facing a whole bunch of fraud charges, accused of taking money from thousands of his crypto customers and investors before his company, FTX, collapsed. Kate Rooney has been covering every bit of this. She is joining us now. So here we go. Verdict watch. It's possible they could go till 8 o'clock Eastern tonight. They're going to be back if they don't get a verdict by then. What is the thinking on timeline? What is the thinking on where this goes, just based on the experts you're talking to?
Yeah, Hallie, so the judge decided to extend things until 8 o'clock. Usually court gets out around 4:30. He's trying to give the jury a chance here to get this verdict out before the weekend. Court is not in session tomorrow. So there's not a whole lot you can read into that timeline. He needed to extend it because they're not in session tomorrow. I'm told by legal experts that typically it would take at least, the minimum would be 3 to 4 hours for a case like this. They got it around 2 o'clock. It's a toss-up. If there is a unanimous decision, they need 12 jurors to agree that he knew what was going on at the crypto company and that he had criminal intent. If they all agree on that, there are 7 counts here. Then it could go quickly and we would get something potentially tonight. It's more likely, based on what legal experts are telling me, that it would go into Monday. They want to make sure that they're considering all the facts. This has been a month-long trial. The other thing a legal expert just told me is that they haven't been able to talk about this trial. So there's been 12 people in a room together sitting in this courthouse, and they have been instructed to not mention this. So as he put it, there's a lot that they want to get off their chest. They probably just want to talk through the case to the fellow jurors there, and that alone could take some time.
That is for sure. Kate Rooney, I know you'll be watching it. Come back if you get any news. Thank you so much, Kate. Appreciate it. The FBI today searching a house in Brooklyn that belongs to a chief fundraiser for the New York City mayor in what appears to be a campaign finance-related investigation, according to multiple sources familiar with the matter, talking with our team at WNBC. Look at this. These are some aerials of that FBI search not too long ago this afternoon. Lots of questions here, right? Because Mayor Eric Adams canceled some high-level meetings in D.C. today to meet with White House officials, members of Congress about the migrant crisis. Remember, Adams has said that migrant crisis will, I'm quoting here, destroy New York City. But he went back to New York instead. Adams' spokesperson saying simply he headed back to, quote, address a matter. That's all we heard. Ken Delanian is joining us now. Ken, here's the deal. Just a day ago, right, the mayor told our New York station that he was supposed to be meeting today here in Washington to figure out a plan to manage the surge of migrants coming into New York. The mayor has laid out in no uncertain terms how important this issue is to him. So part of what seems to be raising alarm bells here is that he called off this meeting to go home for an unspecified matter on the same day that the house of a key aide is getting raided.
Yeah, I guess that speaks volumes, right? This is a signature issue for the mayor, and he cancels meetings about it in Washington and rushes back. I think that speaks to the significance of what happened. And, you know, the New York Times has some new reporting that, I just got a text that WNBC has confirmed this as well, that the search warrant in this case says that this is part of a public corruption investigation into whether Mayor Adams' 2021 mayoral campaign conspired with a Brooklyn construction company and the Turkish government to funnel foreign money into the campaign's coffers through a straw donor scheme. And it says the warrant sought evidence of the theft of federal funds, conspiracy to steal federal funds, wire fraud, and wire fraud conspiracy. So it appears to be a very serious matter, and we'll have to wait and see exactly how this develops, Hallie.
I don't want you to get over your skis here, Ken, but I will ask you to parse this into, like, sort of plain English here, right? Does this mean, based on what you and our team are reporting here, and if you need a minute to answer this question, I get it, you'll come back. Does this mean that Mayor Adams himself could be in trouble here?
Could be is the right way to express it. I mean, they would have to have evidence linking him to the scheme. You know, there's plenty of examples of straw donor schemes into campaigns where the candidate was not aware of it and was never charged. So we'll have to wait and see on that. The jury is out. But this is a very serious matter. This fundraiser, whose home was raided today, is a longtime confidant of the mayor, has raised a lot of money for him. And if there are allegations that a foreign government was funneling money into his campaign, that does raise the question, did he know about that? Hallie.
Have there been other potentially unrelated issues related to campaign finance stuff that the administration, that the campaign for Eric Adams has had to deal with previously?
Yeah, there was another straw donor scheme where 6 people were charged in state court with funneling straw donations. That's donations made in the name of other people to subvert campaign finance rules. But Mayor Adams was not implicated in that, has not been charged. He's not been linked and culpable in that scheme. But again, you know, it's ultimately, you're the CEO. You're sort of responsible for everything that happens under your campaign, whether criminally or morally. So this is a complicated problem for him.
Ken Delanian, I'm going to let you get back to work in the phones. We'll check back in with you, I know, in a little bit. Thank you. A lot more coming up here on the show, including the former gang leader charged in Tupac's murder pleading not guilty today in court in Vegas. We'll talk about what's next. Plus, why Toyota is recalling nearly 2 million RAV4s next. The man charged with killing Tupac more than 2 decades ago is pleading not guilty today in court. Here you see Dwayne Keith Davis, also known as Keffy D, walking in for an appearance that was delayed a couple of times after he tried to hire a pretty high-profile lawyer to represent him. That didn't work, so he has a public defender today. Remember, Tupac Shakur died in 1996 in a drive-by shooting in Vegas. Davis has previously described himself as the only person who's still alive who was actually in the car when the shots were fired. Police say the shooting was in retaliation for this fight you see here earlier in the night with Tupac at the MGM Grand. I want to bring in Dana Griffin in Los Angeles. And Dana, we've talked before how the murder of Tupac captured the country in the mid-90s. I mean, this was something everybody knew about. It was so high profile. It was such a cultural sort of touchstone for so many people. And now you have somebody actually entering a plea, not just charged, but entering a plea, not guilty, obviously, in that case. What happens next? And what happened with this whole attorney situation?
Yeah, Hallie, so this was the third arraignment date set that actually resulted in that not guilty plea. 2 weeks ago, attorney Ross Goodman appeared in court, and when the judge asked if he was going to represent Davis, he said he couldn't confirm. Well, yesterday, he issued a brief statement saying that he and Davis were not able to come to terms of an agreement and that he wished him well. Well, today, during that hearing, Davis asked if he could bring Goodman back on at a later date, and the judge said sure, but for now, he's been appointed 2 public defenders. And during the court case, during today's hearing, we learned that the state will not be seeking the death penalty. Davis will be back in court on Tuesday, and according to the district attorney, he believes that a trial date will be set on Tuesday, but it likely won't happen until next year. And you can best believe those public statements that Davis made will be part of the prosecution's presentation. He's talked openly about being in that white Cadillac that pulled up beside Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight's vehicle from where those deadly shots were fired. And it's possible, likely the defense will try to get those public statements thrown out, but the prosecution has taken it a step further to say he just wasn't in the vehicle. He was the man who secured the weapon and handed it to the trigger man, and that's why he is the man who is facing these charges. Hallie?
Dana Griffin live for us there in L.A. Thank you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, healthcare activist Adi Barkan has died several years after he was diagnosed with ALS, according to his family. He fought for healthcare reform, and he advocated for the Affordable Care Act. He was 39 years old. Number 2, Cornell says it'll cancel tomorrow's classes because of extraordinary stress. That's what they're calling it, after a student was federally charged with making anti-Semitic threats. Tomorrow will instead at Cornell be what they call a community day. Number 3, Toyota is recalling almost 2 million RAV4s because of a battery problem that could cause fires. This is for some of the models from 2013 to 2018. Toyota says it's still working on a fix and will let owners know about it by the end of the year. We don't know if there's been any accidents related to these recalled batteries yet. Number 4, Hunter Biden out with a new op-ed today criticizing the way his history of drug abuse has been used against him and his father, the president. He says demonization of addiction has awful consequences for the millions struggling with it. Number 5, dozens of North American birds are going to get renamed. A national bird organization says all the birds named after people, so that's the Wilson's warbler, the Audubon's shearwater, for example, they're all going to get new names because some of those names reflect an exclusionary and harmful past, they say. When we come back, an NBC News exclusive, our Keir Simmons one-on-one with the UK Foreign Secretary about why they're supporting Israel, even as some others push back. Plus, new body cam video showing the dramatic moment. Look at this. The police officers lift a car. They lift a whole car off a man. That's coming up. To an NBC News exclusive now, our own Keir Simmons, one-on-one with a top UK official on that country's support for Israel in the war with Hamas, saying that the UK also backs President Biden's call for a pause in fighting to get people in and out. Listen.
We've been calling for these humanitarian pauses, temporary, localised, to facilitate the evacuation of foreign nationals, including British nationals, and to help facilitate the inward movement of humanitarian aid.
It comes as there's more anger now among some of the international community with others wondering if Israel is following international law here as they retaliate for that Hamas terror attack against them on October 7th. Keir Simmons is joining us now with more from that interview. It's so interesting, Keir. We talked earlier in the show about this fine line that the president here at home is walking. President Biden calling for a temporary pause. That is something that Secretary Blinken is expected to call for tomorrow when he gets to Israel, while also backing Israel's desire to not even consider a ceasefire. You've seen that here. Explain our ally, the UK, sort of where they are, what you got out of this interview in this exclusive here.
Well, Hallie, you know, the UK and US foreign policies are often in lockstep, and certainly in this case. Here are the worries, very briefly. There's the worry about escalation. That's a concern of a clash with Hezbollah in Lebanon that then escalates to a clash with Iran, with Syria, and the US and countries like the UK getting pulled in. There's the worry about what's traditionally called the Arab Street. That's like places like Egypt, where anger on the street erupts and there is instability caused by what's happening. And then there's the worry about the US and the UK's allies and partners. Take, for example, Jordan pulling back its ambassador from Israel, a ally and a partner of the US and the UK, long-standing. All of those things are putting pressure on the foreign policy of the US and of the UK in its support for Israel. I asked Britain's Foreign Secretary about that, and as far as we are now, this point, this hour, this day, he is still determined to support Israel. Take a listen.
We are backing a nation's right to self-defence. We are backing a nation's right to counter-terrorism. But whilst doing so, we are absolutely committed to the rule of law. We raise this. We are absolutely committed to the preservation of civilian life, and we work towards that. And we are absolutely committed to the protection of British nationals in Gaza and in the wider region.
Now, traditionally, the US and the UK have backed Israel up to a point, Hallie, when things got really difficult. But, of course, October the 7th changed many things, and some wonder whether it's changed that kind of calculation too.
Based on the reporting that you've done, Keir, and your many years of experience covering this issue, what are the chances, and I don't want to ask you to handicap this, but that Israel would be swayed by pressure from, let's say, the UK, the US, from Secretary Blinken, et cetera, to do kind of a temporary pause here for humanitarian reasons?
Well, I think one thing's really interesting. You're hearing the White House and the Foreign Secretary, the British Foreign Secretary's language exactly the same. So they're talking about a temporary, localized humanitarian pause. Why are they using that language? Because they're trying to indicate to Israel, this isn't a ceasefire they're asking for. Why do they want it? They want to try and get hostages out, the hostages from around the world and the Israeli hostages. And they also want to see humanitarian aid go in, because that will help. And it also will help the US and the UK to message to the rest of the world, we're not just allowing pressure on the civilian population of Gaza without trying to do something. So there is diplomacy and politics here, particularly in the language, and the language is really important.
Keir Simmons, live for us there in London. Great exclusive, great interview. Thank you for bringing it to us here on the show, Keir. Appreciate it. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, look at this body cam video showing police officers in Florida rescuing a man trapped under his own car. So they run in, they lift the car up. Somebody else pulls him out. He was apparently working under his car when some ramps holding it up fell. Then the car obviously collapsed on top of him. He is alive, and doctors say it is a miracle that he's doing okay, according to his family. Out of our Western Bureau, you know actor Alan Ruck from Succession and Ferris Bueller's Day Off? He was involved in a crash, apparently, with multiple cars in L.A. this week, according to police. Video shows a truck hitting two other cars and then slamming into a pizza shop. Police are looking into this and say one person is in the hospital. Reps for Ruck could not immediately be reached for comment. And out of our Midwest Bureau, about a dozen train cars derailed in Romulus, Michigan today. No immediate threat to the public, no reports of anybody hurt, but crews are still working to try to clear this area out. Coming up here on the show, Target's CEO says shoppers are pulling back even on groceries. We're reading the tea leaves for what this means for holiday spending because, yes, we are in the holiday shopping season. Plus, stories casting Iranian Americans in a new light, popping up on stage and on screen. How people are using art to change the way their community's seen. Later on. Target tonight says shoppers are cutting back on their spending, even on stuff they need, like groceries, because people are feeling so stressed about their budgets right now. But there is some nuance in the numbers. Listen.
When we look at overall retail spending, just look at the top line, you say, all right, a really healthy consumer, and they are spending. But even in food and beverage categories, over the last few quarters, the units, the number of items they're buying, has been declining.
Caleb Silver is joining us now. Help us make sense of this, right? Because basically we saw in the third quarter there, not to get too CNBC-y here, but people went on a spending spree, like people spent money. But now Target's saying they're actually not buying as much stuff, as much actual stuff, including necessities, you know, groceries, et cetera. What's happening?
Yeah, you make a great point. Earlier in the year, Brian Cornell said they were spending less on the discretionary items, the toys, the apparel, the electronics. Now he's saying they're spending less on that and the things they actually need to buy, like groceries, like staples. So Target back in August already lowered its revenue and profit forecasts for this quarter, saying that sales were coming in pretty light. The fact that people are spending less and buying less units and actually buying cheaper products tells you where the consumer's head's at, because Target does offer pretty affordable groceries.
What about the news from Target lining up with like holiday sales, right? Because whether people want to hear it or not, it's November. We're in it. We're post-Halloween. We're in holiday shopping season, right? And the National Retail Federation is out today saying that it's expected to hit some record levels here, between 3% and 4% more than last year's spending. Is that because people are buying more, or is that just because stuff is so expensive these days?
Yeah,
or feels so expensive, even if inflation has been ticking down?
It's a little bit of both. So we actually are expected to spend somewhere around $800 on average per person this holiday season, according to the National Retail Federation. We'll see if that actually comes to pass. That doesn't mean we're going to be spending more on food per se. Holiday shopping encompasses just about everything. And Target is one of the retailers that's off to an early start with the early sort of Black Friday sales. These weekly sales leading up until Black Friday, the biggest holiday shopping day of the year, and after that into Christmas. So they're early, like a bunch of other retailers, trying to get a jump start on offering cheaper prices to make these products available to a price-sensitive consumer.
Caleb Silver, thank you very much. Still to come here on the show, how the Beatles released a new song 45 years in the making with a little help, not from their friends, but from AI. Stay with us. We are coming on the air with that desperate push to get Americans and refugees out of Gaza, with new explosions in just the last couple of hours. I want to show them to you in just a second here in Gaza, even with President Biden calling for a so-called pause in fighting to get prisoners out. We are live on the ground, live at the White House and live at the Capitol with the first big test for the new Speaker of the House, pushing a plan to help get new money to Israel, but not to Ukraine. Just moments ago, the House passing that bill, setting up a showdown in the Senate. We'll take you there. Plus, some potentially explosive new details on the mayor of New York City canceling a super important meeting at the White House to rush back home. Could it have anything to do with the FBI raiding the house of his chief fundraiser? Plus, former President Trump's sons, plural, on the stand. The testimony getting kind of spicy. His daughter, Ivanka, is supposed to testify next week, but will she? New developments on that in just a minute. And the former gang leader charged in Tupac's murder pleading not guilty today in Vegas court. What is next in this very high-profile case? Hey there, I'm Hallie, and tonight Israeli officials say they have Gaza City surrounded now, and that a ceasefire is definitely not on the table, even as the U.S. now is calling for a temporary pause in fighting. Look at this. This is the skyline in Gaza in just the past maybe 90 minutes, not even. You see the sky just getting lit up by some of these explosions. You can see here what the ground campaign looked like a little earlier in the day. The Israeli prime minister says the military is at the height of the battle, in his words, in retaliation for that Hamas terror attack on October 7th. That's after multiple strikes in the last couple days on a packed refugee camp on the north end of the Gaza Strip, with more and more people being rushed to hospitals, people gathering at a school after it happened. And new anger now about just how many innocent civilian lives this war has cost. In Gaza, more than 9,000 people are believed to be dead. In Israel, more than 1,400. More than half of Gaza's population has now been displaced, forced out of their homes, according to one UN agency. But that danger and uncertainty, sending people in Gaza scrambling to try to get out to safety. Today, a group of nearly 80 Americans and their family members were able to get through the border crossing with Egypt. They were able to get into Egypt to relative safety, including Americans like Maha El-Bana, who we had here on this show last hour, along with her sister, Summer. This is their first time seeing each other since Maha had gotten into Egypt. They've been relying mostly on voice notes just to check in with each other to make sure that, in Summer's words, Maha was still alive. Here's the moment we got them on a call together. I know it's tough, this tech here between us and between Egypt, where you are.
Hi, honey.
Summer, what do you want to say to your sister?
I just want to give her a big hug, and I cannot wait for her to take a nice, long, hot shower.
It comes as the White House says it is working to try to get more information about the Americans still stuck in Gaza. And another huge priority, of course, for this administration, the nearly 250 hostages that the Israeli military says are still in the hands of the Hamas terrorists who abducted them. Our Ellison Barber is near the Israel-Gaza border for us tonight. Gabe Gutierrez is at the White House. Ellison, I want to start with you. You've been on the ground. It is now pushing past midnight just about where you are. We have seen in the last 90 minutes those explosions, those strikes. What's happening? What does it mean, and what can you tell us?
Yeah, just so much activity in this area. We're hearing a military helicopter overhead right now. We have seen and heard what sounds like heavy caliber artillery fired into northern Gaza. As you were touching on, showing those images of what we've seen in maybe the last 90 minutes, probably a little less than that, it was just a massive concentration of flares, explosions, and activity in what, from our vantage point, seemed to be like the northwest outskirts of Gaza City. And this is all happening in the hours after a spokesperson for Israel's defense forces said that they had fully encircled Gaza City. That is where Israel has consistently said they plan to focus the majority of their military efforts, on northern Gaza and Gaza City in particular, because they say that is where Hamas militants primarily operate out of. And it appears they are doing exactly what they have said, which is continuing to escalate this, moving forward in stages, and not at all giving consideration or planning to do any sort of ceasefire, despite what U.S. officials and others have been asking for. They have been very clear, from the prime minister to the defense minister to other spokespeople for the IDF, that they plan to continue this war until they have fully dismantled Hamas, to, in their words, make sure they never have the capability to carry out a strike like they carried out in that terror attack on October 7th. According to Israeli forces, the Israeli military, over 300 Israeli soldiers have died since all of this began. They say 19 at least have died since the ground invasion began on Friday. We know Israel has claimed to have killed a number of Hamas militants, including some high-ranking commanders, but we don't have specific numbers in terms of militant deaths on the Hamas side of things here. But, Hallie, we expect this to continue to escalate, and we're hearing the sound of war behind us. Hallie?
Yeah, I mean, we can hear it even just through your microphone with your live shot there, Ellison. One of the big issues across the border in Gaza has been this issue of fuel. And in just the last hour, we've heard from one UN agency saying that getting help to Gaza is so hard, in part because of that, right? Because of this fuel issue. That's even as some U.S. officials and current and former Israeli officials tell NBC News that Hamas is stockpiling potentially hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel, not distributing it, of course, to the civilians who so desperately need it here. Can you give us a gut check, a reality check of what's happening and where that piece of it goes?
Yeah, I mean, Hamas has claimed that Israel's allegations that they have hundreds of thousands of gas stockpiled, they have called that in the past a blatant lie and used terms like that to push back on it. But we do know from what some of the hostages who were released by Hamas have said is they do have things that we know regular civilians in Gaza do not have right now. I mean, people who were released by Hamas talked about how they gave them water, they gave them food, they gave them medicine. All of that is incredibly scarce and difficult to find inside of Gaza for the civilian population. And what has been happening with the hospitals, from the UN saying this to doctors that we have spoken to in the weeks since this began, is that they are in situations where they are constantly worried about the generators running out of fuel and then the hospitals closing. And they're worried about that because it has happened to a number of hospitals in the Gaza Strip so far to date. That's one reason why there was this humanitarian agreement to allow some Gazans who had been injured out of Gaza into Egypt so they could get treatment at Egyptian hospitals because the system and everything is just so taxed inside of Gaza. I mean, for regular people, the situation there, we call it a humanitarian crisis. I think we say that a lot, and sometimes it loses its impact, but it is a dire humanitarian crisis where someone I spoke to a week ago was telling me they are essentially rationing their food and water. I asked them, what are you eating? And he said, we feed our kids first, and then if there's anything left over, we eat it. He said the only bakery to get bread in his neighborhood had been hit by an Israeli airstrike, and they would get up and wait in line for hours to find pieces of bread. So it is a catastrophe, to say the least. Hallie?
Yeah, it sounds like it. Ellison Barber, thank you so much for being there live for us on the ground. I want to bring in Gabe Gutierrez live at the White House because there is a significant diplomatic piece of this today, right? We know that the White House, the administration, the president himself has called for what they describe as a pause, right? They're going out of their way to say, wait, that's not a ceasefire. Don't call it a ceasefire. That's not what we want. It's a temporary pause. I think to some people that may sound like a matter of semantics, but internationally it is incredibly significant, right? The distinction between a temporary humanitarian pause and a full-on permanent ceasefire here. It is the expectation, I think, Gabe, that when Secretary of State Tony Blinken gets to the region, I think as soon as tomorrow, that he will push that message from the U.S., that Israel should essentially back off on the fighting temporarily for now. Talk us through the dynamics here. Talk us through the expectations for the next 24, 48 hours.
You know, Hallie, you're exactly right. This idea of a humanitarian pause, actually, that had been something the Biden administration had been talking about for several days. But over the last 24 hours or so, that word pause has really gotten a lot of attention, in large part because the president himself said that word during a campaign event last night where he was interrupted by a protester who identified herself as a local rabbi in Minnesota. And she asked him why he wouldn't support a ceasefire. And he said that the White House, that the president himself, was supporting this humanitarian pause. But as you say, Hallie, this is something that could be looked upon as some semantics. Does the White House want a pause? How is that different from a temporary ceasefire? Still, they've been very reluctant to use that word. And National Security spokesman John Kirby was asked about that today during the White House briefing. Take a listen.
What we're talking about are temporary, localized pauses in the fighting to meet a certain goal or goals. As I said, get A in, get people out.
And Hallie, it's significant there. John Kirby saying pauses plural. So this is not just one humanitarian pause, but this is something that could happen over and over again. Again, this is something that the White House has been very cognizant of, choosing its words very carefully because it does not want to make it seem like it's telling Israel what to do, Hallie.
Yeah, that's for sure. Gabe Gutierrez live for us there at the White House. And speaking of everything we're talking about here, we know that domestically there have been demonstrations, there have been protests. There's one happening right now. We want to show you a live picture now out of Philly, 30th Street Station. That's like the big train station there. It's the equivalent of like Grand Central in New York or what have you. You have demonstrators calling for a ceasefire. Just some of the protests that have been happening ever since that Hamas terror attack on Israel back on October 7th. As we have been on the air back here in Washington now, the House has voted now, just the last few minutes, to pass a bill to give Israel $14 billion in emergency money. It's kind of the first big test for the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Thing is, Democrats say this bill isn't really going anywhere at all because Democrats in the Senate and President Biden have said they don't support it, partly because of the plan's proposed cuts to the IRS and partly because these Senate Democrats want to pay for other things, too. They want to make sure to give humanitarian aid to Gaza. They want to make sure that there is money to fund Ukraine in its war with Russia. They want to make sure there's some money in there for the U.S.-Mexico border. Here's what the new Speaker, Mike Johnson, is saying in his first leadership news conference today.
Israel doesn't need a ceasefire. It needs its allies to cease with the politics and deliver support now. And that's what we're doing. House Republicans plan to do that. We're going to do it in short order, and it provides Israel the aid it needs to defend itself, free its hostages, and eradicate Hamas.
Sahel Kapoor is joining us now. Okay, so let's start micro and then let's get macro here. We love buckets on this show. Let's take bucket number one, which is this particular vote that has just now passed the House in, like, I think the last 15 minutes or so. 12 Democrats joined nearly all Republicans, right, to vote for this bill, even though it appears that it's not going anywhere. Explain the dynamics.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Hallie. In just the last few minutes, the House voted to pass a bill led by Republicans, the first major piece of legislation by Speaker Mike Johnson on the floor. It passed on a vote of 226 to 196. A dozen Democrats, 12 of them, voted with Republicans to pass it, and there were just two defections on the Republican side that Speaker Mike Johnson lost on his end. Now, we know this bill is going nowhere in the Senate. Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, has declared it dead on arrival. He's made clear they're not even going to vote on it. He wants to move that larger package, more than $100 billion of President Biden's other priorities. That includes Ukraine aid. And the next move now is on Chuck Schumer to come up with a bill, see if he can find that 60 votes for it in the Senate and put pressure back on the House. This is, of course, only phase one of Speaker Johnson's plan. He's trying to make a law here, trying to get Israel aid passed. And it's not going to happen with these $14.3 billion in IRS cuts ripped straight out of President Biden's signature legislative achievement, which prompted a veto threat from the president. It also drew objections from many Democrats who support the aid to Israel, but don't like the fact that it raises the deficit by more than the amount of what it cuts, according to the CBO, because it lowers tax revenue collection. So that's phase one. What remains to be seen is what phase two looks like.
So that's the micro bucket. Got it, right? Macro bucket. Speaker Mike Johnson, what does this say to you, the way that this is unfolded here, about his leadership abilities as we are getting now much closer, just 15 days away from that deadline to potentially have the government shut down?
And these things are all connected, Hallie. Right now, Speaker Johnson is in a bit of a honeymoon phase. There are many Republicans who want to give him some rope, give him the benefit of the doubt, support his plans at this moment. Israel, that bill was one aspect of it. But from here, the challenges only grow. He's got to figure out what to do about Ukraine aid. He's acknowledged divisions within his party, as well as within the Republicans in the House and the Senate on the issue of Ukraine aid. There's 15 days before the government shuts down, unless he finds a way to work with Democrats in the Senate and President Biden to make a law. That's going to be much harder than what he proved capable of doing today, which is unifying his Republican conference. Again, phase two, we're about to find out what that looks like.
Sahal Kapoor, we'll see. Thank you. On the other side of the Capitol, a tiny but significant crack tonight in a months-long blockade of military promotions, as the Senate late today has confirmed 3 high-level Navy, Air Force, and Marine officers. A big deal. A big moment. Why? Because it means the Joint Chiefs of Staff is now fully in place, and at a very key time, considering, of course, the war in the Middle East, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But you've got some 360-plus other nominations still being held up, a problem for the military. Because Alabama Republican Tommy Tuberville is protesting the Defense Department's reproductive rights policy. That's why he's been really slowing things down. But now even some of his fellow Republican senators seem to have started to have enough, essentially. It's why you're seeing this moment happen. For military families, the end of this blockade cannot come soon enough. Listen to what one advocate is telling our own Ryan Nobles.
These families have been serving for literally decades, and this is the first time where they are being used as political pawns. These are the people that just make the big decisions about war and peace and funding, and here it's at a standstill. They can't even get them confirmed for these really, really important jobs, and it just feels like a complete failure and a slap in the face for their service.
Ryan Nobles is joining us now. Ryan, I want to get to in a second why this matters to people, right, beyond those who cover the Beltway. And there is a significant reason about why it matters. It's military readiness. But before that, explain here, just context-wise, this is not how things are supposed to work. Like, typically, it doesn't go like this. This is not normally how we get top high-level officers in the military into their positions, right?
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. I mean, in general, confirming military promotions is among the most mundane procedural things that the United States Senate does. It's usually something that's done by a voice vote. It's often unanimous unless there is a specific controversy involving a specific military member that's being promoted in one way, shape, or form. Generally, the Senate trusts the military brass to make these decisions, and it's done without any controversy. This is different, and it really has nothing to do with these military officials. It has to do with Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama having a specific problem with a Pentagon policy regarding abortion. He does not believe that the Department of Defense should be paying for the travel of service members who are stationed in states where abortion restriction laws have been put into place. He believes that that should have been something that was codified in law, not made unilaterally by the Pentagon. The Pentagon obviously disagrees, and so he's using this blockade as a way to get their attention, and that is really what's angered many of his fellow senators, because they don't believe that he should be using this power in this kind of fashion.
So explain the real-world impact, because the spokesperson for some of those military families that you talked with there at the Capitol earlier today was laying this out. And we've heard this before. And the challenge is, and I just want to tell people, these military families can't come out and talk about it, right? I mean, they are in many ways prohibited from doing that because of the chain of command, because of their actual jobs. But you are hearing from some people, just one sort of ring outside their circle, about what a problem this is for their lives. People getting so frustrated, fed up, feeling like this country doesn't have their back after their years of service.
Yeah, Hallie, our team's been covering this story for about 7 months. We've begged some of these military officials to talk to us about it. They will not break the chain of command. That is not how they operate. So we were fortunate to talk to this woman who is very closely connected to these military families. And she tells me it's a twofold problem. The first being the immediate problem, right? There are more than 350 officers who just aren't in place to do their job, to protect the United States, a vital component of national security. And then on the other end of it, it's these other officers who are awaiting these significant promotions that they've worked their entire lives for, that they've moved their families all around the world and uprooted them from place to place to get to this position. And they're just sick and tired of it. And they're just going to retire, go to perhaps more lucrative jobs in the private sector, which gives their families more stability. So you have the short-term problem of military readiness, and then the long-term problem of losing this generational expertise within the military. Both are a big problem, and both are only going to continue to grow unless the Senate figures a way out of this mess.
Super quick, Ryan, any sense that Senator Tuberville is going to back off on this?
None whatsoever. I've talked to him about this a lot. Hallie, his position has not changed from what it was 7 months ago to the conversation we had with him today. He just feels no incentive to back off this. He believes it's too big of an issue for him at this particular moment.
Ryan Nobles, just outside the Capitol as the sun is setting here in Washington. Ryan, thank you so much. We'll look for more of your reporting coming up tonight on NBC Nightly News. To New York now, because it is Trump kid musical chairs in court today as the second son of former President Trump takes the stand in that big civil tax fraud case against the Trumps and their company. A smile and a wave from Eric Trump as he is walking out of court today. No comment to reporters there. But before that, you saw both he and his brother, Donald Trump Jr., Don Jr., at the defense table before their testimony today. Eric Trump, at one point, sounding kind of frustrated as prosecutors pressed him on his father's financial statements that the AG says were wildly inflated. That's at the heart, remember, of this case against former President Trump, that he exaggerated how much he was worth. Mr. Trump, late today on Truth Social, saying, "So sad to see my sons being persecuted in what he calls a political witch hunt." Next week, it's his daughter Ivanka and the former president himself who are set to take the stand. I want to bring in Lindsay Reiser, who's live for us outside the courthouse. Spicy at the end, Lindsay, right? I mean, things got tossed around, accusations of misogyny, etc. What's up?
I just want to mention that there is a fire truck going behind me, so we're going to hear a bit of a siren here. And as you mentioned, Ivanka is actually appealing. She's appealing having to come and testify, and she's asking for a stay of the entire trial right now because of that. But let's go ahead and move on, as you mentioned, those fireworks right before court adjourned. This was all over an aside over the judge's law clerk. Chris Kice, Trump's attorney, essentially said the clerk keeps giving the judge information. She may have a different view of the case than you based on her political background. And the judge shot back, essentially saying, I have an absolute unfettered right, and I'm reading from my notes, to get advice from my principal law clerk. And Kice at one point referred to notes that were being passed, and that's when the judge pounded the table and said he got so mad and said he has every right to get notes and that his notes are not privy to anybody. So definite fireworks there before court adjourned for the day, Hallie.
Lindsay Reiser live for us there in a busy New York City. Lindsay, thank you so much. The fate of the former king of crypto is now officially in the hands of a jury in New York, and it is possible they could deliberate past dinner time. In fact, right now they're taking a little break for dinner. They're going to get back at it in just a little bit. This is after the jury's final instructions from the judge as they determine whether Sam Bankman-Fried broke the law or not. He's facing a whole bunch of fraud charges in this historic trial. He's accused of taking money from thousands of his crypto customers and investors before his company, FTX, collapsed. Kate Rooney is joining us now. So a couple questions, Kate. First, timeline. This is what everybody wants to know. So we're on verdict watch. How long are we going to be on verdict watch based on what legal experts you talk to are saying? What's their best educated guess?
Hallie, that's the question of the hour. I'm told lightning fast it would be 3 to 4 hours. They started deliberation today around 3 o'clock. So that would take us to the end of today. If they moved extremely quickly, we could get a verdict by the end of tonight. As you said, the judge extended the hours. Usually court adjourns around 4:30, extended it to 8 p.m. in the event that they want to get this done before the weekend. There could be some jurors who do have that psychology going on that they want to get this done before Monday, actually. They're not in court tomorrow. They're off tomorrow. It could come back on Monday. The most likely thesis that I'm hearing from legal experts is sometime on Monday. Usually it takes a day and a half, 2 days to get something like this done. They've heard mountains of evidence. This has been a 4-week trial, and there's been a ton that they've heard about from different testimonies of experts, documents, and then some of Sam Bankman-Fried's inner circle as well. They also heard from him on the stand. They also have not been able to talk about this. They're instructed to not mention this case to each other until they go into deliberations. So there's a sense of wanting to discuss it with the other jurors, which could also take some time. So that's the question of the hour, Hallie. I'm also told that it's not great news if they do come to a quick decision. Most likely, it's a prosecution for Sam Bankman-Fried.
That's so interesting. And like, I know it's like the unanswerable question. Let me ask you this, because you mentioned one of the highest profile moments of this entire trial, and that is SBF, as he's known, taking the stand himself. This was a highly controversial decision, but it is one that clearly Sam Bankman-Fried and his team felt like they needed to do here. We've talked a lot about how there were some question marks around whether he was being evasive, the way the defense presented it, the way the prosecution presented it. Was there any suggestion, because sometimes you can read the tea leaves from a jury if they pass a note to the judge, if they ask a specific thing or whatever, any kind of tea leaf reading we can do on that front, or have they really been a black box through all this?
So it's interesting about the jury and their mannerisms. They're sort of you can think of it as a goldfish bowl. They know they're under the microscope. They actually try in a lot of instances to not give much away. So I'm told they can kind of have a sort of poker face when it comes to studying the witness on the stand. And when it comes to Sam Bankman-Fried, what they're really going to be looking at is his credibility, and that will be the big discussion. Do they believe him? Do they take him at his word? And was he a likable, sympathetic witness in a lot of ways? And they're going to weigh what he said up there versus his top 3 lieutenants. You heard an almost identical story from those 3, who ranged from his high school best friend, college best friend, to his former girlfriend. So that's one thing you can be sure that they're going to be talking about is, did they find him credible? We didn't quite get that sense, though, when they were in the courtroom, but we'll see what they're saying behind closed doors right now.
That's for sure. Kate Rooney live for us there in New York. Kate, we'll talk again. Thank you. Also in New York, the FBI today searching a house in Brooklyn that belongs to a chief fundraiser for the New York City mayor in what appears to be a campaign finance-related investigation, according to multiple sources familiar with the matter, talking with our team at WNBC. You're looking at some aerial pictures here of this search. It wasn't too long ago. With the New York Times tonight now reporting that this search is part of a broad public corruption investigation by the FBI and federal prosecutors in Manhattan. Now, there are lots of questions here, right? And here's why. Mayor Eric Adams was supposed to be in Washington today. He was supposed to be here for some high-level meetings with White House officials and members of Congress about the migrant crisis, a crisis that Adams has said, and I'm quoting here, will destroy New York City. He bailed on those meetings. He's headed back home to New York unexpectedly, with Adams' spokesperson saying simply he went back to address a matter. I'm quoting here, address a matter. Ken Delanian is joining us now. And Ken, this is what's raising some alarm bells here is after Mayor Adams has been very clear about what an important issue this is for him, the migrant crisis. He talked just yesterday to WNBC about coming down for these meetings. All of a sudden it's called off. He's in New York. This search happens. What else are we hearing from this search warrant that specifically the New York Times got a hold of?
Yeah, well, first of all, that was a big deal for him to cancel or step out of meetings on what has been a signature issue for him. Yes, the New York Times has gotten a hold of this sealed search warrant. NBC News and WNBC have not confirmed these details. But what the Times is saying is that this is part of an investigation into whether Turkey or Turkish money was funneled surreptitiously into Eric Adams' campaign. He's got long-standing ties with Turkey. He's been to the country 6 or 7 times, he has said. The warrant, the Times said, also mentioned an investigation into theft of federal funds, wire fraud, other kinds of crimes. So it seems very serious. It's the public corruption squad that carried out the raid, according to the Times, which reported that they questioned Brianna Suggs' fundraiser at her home. She has long-standing ties to the mayor. She's raised a lot of money for Mayor Adams. She's also lobbied on behalf of a real estate entity in front of his administration. So this thing looks like it has legs, Hallie.
Ken Delanian live for us on that. Ken, thank you. Lots of moving pieces. Appreciate you staying on top of it. We've got a lot more to get to on this show, including millions of people without power in Western Europe tonight after a record-breaking storm. We've got the warning from officials there. Plus, the FDA hoping to ban an ingredient found in some soda and sports drinks. Why the agency says it could be bad for your health. Coming up. The head of HBO is apologizing tonight after what he calls a very, very dumb idea. We'll tell you what it is coming up. But first, the man charged in the killing of Tupac more than 2 decades ago is pleading not guilty in court today. Here he is, Dwayne Keith Davis, also known as Keffy D. He's walking in for an appearance that was delayed a couple of times after he tried to hire a pretty high-profile lawyer to represent him. That didn't work out, so he had a public defender today. Remember, Tupac Shakur was killed in 1996 in a drive-by shooting in Vegas. Davis has previously described himself as the only person still alive who was in the car when those shots were fired. Police say the shooting was in retaliation for this fight, you see here, earlier in the night with Tupac at the MGM Grand. I want to bring in Dana Griffin, who's live for us in Los Angeles. So, Dana, to be clear here, Davis is not the one being accused of pulling the trigger here, but he is still, in the eyes of prosecutors, culpable, right? Explain to us where this goes.
Yeah. So although he did not pull the trigger, investigators say Dwayne Davis orchestrated Tupac's murder after that MGM fight where his nephew was jumped by Tupac and his entourage. It was caught on that surveillance video you just shown. Today, Davis pleaded not guilty, and it has taken more than a month for him to enter a plea because the hearing kept getting pushed back. Davis had not secured an attorney, so today a judge appointed 2 public defenders. We also heard in court today that the state will not seek the death penalty, but the DA says that Davis's own words about being in that vehicle will be part of the prosecution's presentation. We know he's talked in podcasts, he's talked in his own memoir about that night. It's likely the defense will try to get that evidence thrown out, but you know, that's part of the case here. And I've heard from the former LA detective involved in this case. He says they've known for years who was involved in the murder of Tupac Shakur, but it's not about what you know, it's about what you can prove. And in this case, Las Vegas investigators say they have enough evidence to prove Davis's guilt. He'll be back in court on Tuesday for a status hearing, and that is likely when they will set a trial date. Hallie?
Dana Griffin live for us there in L.A. Dana, thanks. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, Alabama's state Supreme Court says the state can execute an inmate with nitrogen gas. That method has not been used in a death sentence before. It essentially means that inmates would only breathe nitrogen, not have enough oxygen, and die. Alabama's Attorney General suggested in court filings they plan to use the method on death row inmate Kenneth Eugene Smith. There are likely to be more legal fights over this. Number 2, rescuers are still searching for somebody trapped in the rubble of that Kentucky coal plant we told you about that collapsed earlier this week. Officials say one worker who was prepping the plant for demolition died. They are still, at this point, hoping to find the other man alive. Number 3, Toyota is recalling nearly 2 million RAV4s because of a battery problem that could cause fires. It's for some models from 2013 to 2018. Toyota says it's still working on a fix. They'll let owners know about it by the end of the year. We don't know if there have been any accidents related to these recalled batteries. Number 4, the FDA today proposing to ban brominated vegetable oil. If you're like, what's that? It's used in some, like sports drinks, some sodas, specifically some fruit-flavored ones, to prevent ingredients from separating. The agency says it's no longer safe after studies found it could be linked to health problems. Now, the big companies, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, for example, they've already stopped using it. Number 5, the head of HBO is apologizing today for using fake Twitter accounts to respond to negative reviews of HBO shows. This apology comes after a Rolling Stone report said he and another HBO staffer talked about using a quote-unquote secret army to respond to TV critics online. The CEO said it was a very, very dumb idea to vent frustration. Don't feed the trolls, you know? When we come back, an NBC exclusive. Our own Keir Simmons going one-on-one with a top UK official. What he's saying about the country's support for Israel. Plus, new details tonight in those suspected mushroom poisonings in Australia. It's coming up. One of the world's top soccer players may be out for a year. We'll tell you who and why coming up in just a sec. But first tonight, an NBC News exclusive. Our own Keir Simmons, one-on-one with a top UK official on the country's support for Israel in its war with Hamas after that terror attack on October 7th. Telling Keir that the UK also backs President Biden's call for a pause in fighting to get people in and out. Listen.
We've been calling for these humanitarian pauses, temporary, localised, to facilitate the evacuation of foreign nationals, including British nationals, and to help facilitate the inward movement of humanitarian aid.
This comes as there's more international anger here in some quarters, with some wondering if Israel is following international law. Keir Simmons is joining us now. So, Keir, just what a great interview, and I want you to talk us through it. And what's so interesting here, and as you have noted, and I think it's important, is the way that there is no daylight between the way that the UK talks about a temporary pause and the way that the United States talks about a temporary pause. We talked earlier in the show about how that is distinct in the eyes of this administration from a full-on ceasefire, and that is an important distinction in the words when it comes to the diplomatic arena.
Yes, because Israel is saying there's no ceasefire. And so what the US and the UK, both countries, of course, have hostages in Gaza, and other countries are trying to do is they're trying to use language that will make a pause, a temporary pause, a local pause, look different to Israel and achieve that for two reasons. One, to get the hostages out, and two, to try and get aid in, to try and help the many innocent people in Gaza. You're right, the foreign policies of the US and the UK often are very, very close. In the past, what's happened, Hallie, is that Israel has had the US backing over a period of time, and then at some point the US will say, OK, it needs to stop now. Whether it's going to happen this time that way, because October the 7th changed so much, is a question. Listen to the Foreign Secretary answer that question to me and how determined he still seems.
We are backing a nation's right to self-defence. We are backing a nation's right to counter-terrorism. But whilst doing so, we are absolutely committed to the rule of law. We raise this. We are absolutely committed to the preservation of civilian life, and we work towards that. And we're absolutely committed to the protection of British nationals in Gaza and in the wider region.
The rule of law is another important point there, Hallie. We've talked about it many times during this conflict so far, because, of course, the rule of law is what Ukraine says it's fighting for, why America says it's backing Ukraine. So there are many countries looking very closely at what's happening in Gaza and looking to see if there's a difference and accusing the West of hypocrisy if there is.
I don't want to give people whiplash here, Keir, but this ties into something else that was happening in the UK, which is this big AI summit happening there today. That's the backdrop for your conversation with him here. And there was this warning that I thought was interesting about the way that AI is increasing divisions around the world as we're seeing what's happening in the Middle East.
That's so right. We've got to remember that what's happening in the Middle East is happening in the context of a divided world. We know, of course, that social media fueled that divided world. It fueled, of course, divisions in US domestic politics and here in the UK. The fear now is that AI could actually exacerbate that. The Foreign Secretary suggested actually that AI can also help. It can be used to tackle those kinds of issues with social media. I thought that was fascinating. I did also ask him quickly, Hallie, about the question of whether or not AI is going to cause more issues for elections. Fascinating thing. The US election next year and the UK election next year are likely to happen around about the same time. And one of the urgencies, I think, with AI is to get to grips with it before those elections, because, of course, we know what happens if Western countries holding elections haven't got a grip on the internet and on new developments in the internet when the votes take place.
Keir Simmons, it is just fascinating. We're so glad that you brought us that interview. Great work, as always. Thanks for staying up late for us tonight in London. More international news now, because we know it can be tough to read or watch or listen to all those stories. Our teams around the world have done it for you. Here is some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Australia, police say they charged a woman with murder after 3 people died from suspected mushroom poisoning at a family meal she cooked. When this happened over the summer, the suspect said she didn't do anything. She's now in custody. She's set to be in court tomorrow. In Europe, at least 5 people have died as a huge bomb cyclone, as they call it, smashed into the western coast today. We're talking record-breaking winds, up to 118 miles an hour, whipping France and Spain and the UK. It cut off power to millions of houses. The storm also knocked over trees. It brought whole buildings down. It created a ton of flooding, too. And in Brazil, soccer superstar Neymar just underwent successful surgery after an ACL tear. Recovery should keep him off the pitch anywhere from 6 months to a whole year. He recently moved to Saudi Arabia's Al Hilal team from a Paris team in a deal worth an estimated $96 million. Coming up, Target CEO says shoppers are spending less money, even on stuff they really need, the essentials. We're talking about what it could mean for the holiday shopping season, which, yes, is upon us now. Plus, an inside look at a history-making movie, how the Persian version is trying to rewrite stereotypes around Iranian Americans. That's later in the original. Target tonight says shoppers are cutting back on their spending, even on stuff they need, like groceries, because people are feeling so stressed about their budgets right now. But there is some nuance in the numbers. Listen.
We look at overall retail spending, just look at the top line, you say, all right, a really healthy consumer, and they are spending. But even in food and beverage categories, over the last few quarters, the units, the number of items they're buying, has been declining.
Caleb Silver is joining us now. Help us make sense of this, right? Because basically we saw in the third quarter there, not to get too CNBC-y here, but people went on a spending spree, like people spent money. But now Target's saying they're actually not buying as much stuff, as much actual stuff, including necessities, groceries, et cetera. What's happening?
Yeah, you make a great point. Earlier in the year, Brian Cornell said they were spending less on the discretionary items, the toys, the apparel, the electronics. Now he's saying they're spending less on that and the things they actually need to buy, like groceries, like staples. So Target back in August already lowered its revenue and profit forecast for this quarter, saying that sales were coming in pretty light. The fact that people are spending less and buying less units and actually buying cheaper products tells you where the consumer's head's at, because Target does offer pretty affordable groceries.
What about the news from Target lining up with like holiday sales, right? Because whether people want to hear it or not, it's November. We're in it. We're post-Halloween. We're in holiday shopping season, right? And the National Retail Federation is out today saying that it's expected to hit some record levels here, between 3% and 4% more than last year's spending. Is that because people are buying more, or is that just because stuff is so expensive these days?
Yeah,
or feels so expensive, even if inflation has been ticking down?
It's a little bit of both. So we actually are expected to spend somewhere around $800 on average per person this holiday season, according to the National Retail Federation. We'll see if that actually comes to pass. That doesn't mean we're going to be spending more on food per se. Holiday shopping encompasses just about everything. And Target is one of the retailers that's off to an early start with the early sort of Black Friday sales. These weekly sales leading up until Black Friday, the biggest holiday shopping day of the year, and after that into Christmas. So they're early, like a bunch of other retailers, trying to get a jump start on offering cheaper prices to make these products available to a price-sensitive consumer.
Caleb Silver, thank you very much. Still to come here on the show, how the Beatles released a new song 45 years in the making with a little help, not from their friends, but from AI. Stay with us.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.